Let's talk about this ever-popular trending topic in the spiritual communities called shadow work. The objectives of shadow work in the context of personal spirituality is to temper your thoughts and to temper your emotions. Basically, it's to give you better balance and stability so the slightest push or poke doesn't knock you right over. Here's the theory. When you get that knee-jerk hostile reaction or response to something someone else has said or done, even when it really has absolutely nothing at all to do with you, you make it about you, like it's all in your head. You make the situation about you, and then you take it very personally, take offense, and then because you're offended, you lash out. In that moment of lashing out, of taking it personally, you lose balance. You're imbalanced. The more frequently you get imbalanced, the more permanently scattered or frenetic your personal energy or power gets. It's a lot harder to be strong and stable and therefore indomitable when you're constantly out of balance. So that's why the occultist would do well to engage in some form of shadow work. And of course, shadow work comes in many forms, and almost every cultural tradition of occultism has its own modality of shadow work. Shadow work is just this modern day Western terminology we've slapped onto a universal concept. We as a community often talk about just the extreme situations in shadow work where you're using shadow work to confront trauma. And I think we limit our conversations about shadow work to just trauma because it makes shadow work sound really deep and badass. I don't know. To be human is to let our personal relationships dictate our lives. You say you don't, but you do, or at least a lot of us do. Something like who you have a committed partnership with could have radical and dynamic consequences to your health, well-being, fortunes. I mean, everything about your life could tip one way or the other based on who your partner is. So, when relationships have messed up our lives or really done a number on our fortunes or well-being, they leave us with a wound. And if you don't properly heal that wound, that person, even when he or she is completely out of your life, still continues to have a detrimental impact over you. Shadow work can be about confronting the impact that our relationships, past and present, are having on us and how to neutralize negative impact. Funny enough, in these so-called spiritual, new age, or any religious community, when people lose their minds on the internet over somebody else's opinion, like pure opinion, something we all understand is subjective, so what the hell are you losing your mind about? When that happens, that's shadow coming to the surface. Think about what happens when you get triggered like that. You lose your focus, first of all. Whatever important, like real productive work you were doing before gets pushed to the side, and now you're just obsessed about this thing that got you triggered, this thing that has nothing to do with you, but you're making it about you. You're getting hot under the collar over something that could easily have zero impact on your life, you know? Like you're causing detriment to yourself and then you experience real detriment in your life. And then what do? You blame the trigger. Part of me kind of feels like this whole trigger warning Z generation is in some bizarre way demonic, figure of speech, because they're preserving the power and existence and influence of the shadow, you know? You can't live in this world where the words that other people utter break you down and render you unstable. You've got to rein that in, and you've got to learn how to not be triggered by words. And one way to do that is shadow work. It's not some profound psychological process, though of course the results of shadow work can be profound. Personally, I'd rather get triggered and then have the opportunity to say to myself, okay, what the heck just happened to me? Why? What's this feeling I'm feeling? And then work through that, process it, get to the shadow and then expunge it so that when the same trigger happens again, I'm fine, I'm smiling, I'm calm, it's all good. You really don't want to get into this place of censoring what pains you, what offends you, because that's kind of like the total opposite of shadow work. Grammar Nazis getting way worked up about how someone else misspells a word or, heaven forbid, mispronounces a word. Here's the thing about that. Yeah, of course. Attention to detail when it comes to our communications is something we want to personally strive for and celebrate and always work on as individuals. But to get emotional about how somebody else has misspelled or mispronounced something is, get this, it's classist. There is some underbelly of deeply rooted classism going on there. Don't just take my word for it, check it for yourself. Pay attention to who in your social network is obscenely fixated on criticizing others about their spelling or pronunciation, and then just kind of secretly, don't go wagging your fingers at people, secretly do an armchair amateur psychoanalysis of them. You'll probably realize they're kind of, or maybe very classist people. It's like passive aggressive classism. Or, okay, like the other day on my social media, I posted some like fun, stupid thing about, yay, eclipse, I'm gonna do this during the eclipse, then I'm gonna do that. Oh yeah, I'm so badass, eclipse, eclipse, eclipse. And then this person I really admire, I really dig his work, he posts on his own feed that eclipse energy is super bad and any serious practitioner would avoid eclipse energy like the plague, and all these pseudo wannabe witches celebrating the eclipse are idiots. He didn't say my name, and I'm actually 100% sure his post has nothing whatsoever to do with me, and he probably doesn't even know I exist, honestly. But logic and reason did not keep me from getting totally offended and just, fuming and angry all by myself in my little corner of the world. Like, what? What am I achieving right now from getting so offended, curled up in my pajamas, sipping tea while scrolling through Facebook on my iPhone? All right, here's the shadow work truth bomb on myself. What is going on here? See, on some stupid, secret, subconscious level, I want this public figure's approval. I want someone of this person's professional stature to agree with someone like me. Again, he doesn't even know I exist. He couldn't give enough shits to agree or disagree with me. Am I right? Now, I think the part that does get deep is the imposter syndrome, right? The part of me feeling like I am inadequate, and sooner or later, the world is going to realize that I'm inadequate. So, anything external, any stupid comment or passing statement made around me that happens to trigger me into having to, in some way or another, confront the question, am I adequate? And if I can't sincerely and confidently answer yes to myself, something in me starts to pulsate with pain, with anxiety. Functioning completely on the subconscious level with this pulsing anxiety, I have to either admit I am inadequate or lash out at the other person to put that other person in his place, make sure that person is validated as wrong, thereby validating me as right, thereby validating that I am adequate. Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, simple shadow work 101 might look something like me taking a moment to ground and center myself, to just breathe, slow my breath down, and ask the question, face it head on. And watch this, it has nothing at all to do with the person who triggered me. I ask myself, why was I so happy about the blood moon lunar eclipse in the first place? This can involve research, like literally looking up astronomical information about what lunar eclipses are. This is the reading up on history, on what different cultures and civilizations around the world thought of eclipses and why. Why would those cultures feel the way they felt about eclipses? What was it about these circumstances of their time and space that would cause their response to a lunar eclipse versus a solar eclipse? And yeah, let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's compare and contrast lunar eclipses and solar eclipses, partial and total eclipses. How about zodiac signs, tropical or sidereal, Vedic, whole signs, 12 mansions, draconic, placidus, coach? Then there's just the intuitive part. How do eclipses make me feel? Is that good enough for me? Are my feelings strong enough to block out, ward, and neutralize anything counter to those sentiments? Eventually, the work you're doing gets you to a place of true, I mean genuine, sincere, and confident realization, wow, okay, I really do know what I'm talking about. I'm adequate. Suddenly, what anyone anywhere has to say about, well, in the case of my example, lunar eclipses, no longer matter to me because within myself, I have arrived at a place where I know that I know what I'm talking about. I don't need to respond to that person, leave some nasty troll comment, or even try to defend my position. People around me can think and say whatever they want because I know what I know. See, identifying that it's a confidence, insecurity, and adequacy problem, and then saying to yourself, damn it, self, you are adequate, you're awesome. I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's shadow work. Shadow work is hard because it's work. It's, well, simply put, it's due diligence. It's about rectifying that feeling of inadequacy. And yeah, maybe sometimes that can look like overcompensation, and that at some future point down the line, you'll have to do shadow work around your tendency to overcompensate. Oh, but wait, fair is fair. I think I should mention this. In occult circles, there is this ritual in Taoist ceremonial magic where the concept is you summon a demon from within, and that demon is a part of you. You thrust it out of you so it takes externalized form, and then you confront that demon. You can either vanquish that demon or you can imprison it in some way and command that demon to do your bidding. The concept is premised on the metaphysical theory in Taoist occultism, where different energy points inside of you can be expressed as divinities, gods and goddesses, sorta, with inner female and inner male expressions of those divinities, no matter how you identify your gender outwardly. Meaning, just because you're a woman doesn't mean all the inner divinities are goddesses. Male or female, there's both god and goddess energy inside. It's like a really long story. Maybe we can talk about it in a different video. Okay, so you have these inner gods or inner lords. You also have inner demons. Strictly speaking, in a religious and occult ritual sense, if you're summoning these inner demons to thrust outward and externalizing them for confrontation, and you don't know what you're doing, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll just say maybe that level or modality of shadow work is not something I would play around with. I think if that's something you're dabbling with, you might want to work with a couple of partners in a group setting in some way where you've got like actual other practitioners around you to support you. Like, that's not something to do alone in isolation with nobody around. And I didn't say supervision. My personal opinion is you don't need someone bigger and wiser than you to oversee what you're doing, though that helps. But you do need to be surrounded by love and people who really, really care about you, ride or die practitioner friends who can, if needed, come together, pool their collective powers and abilities together to help your dumb ass out. When people give these ominous warnings about needing expert care, like you shouldn't be doing shadow work without the guidance of a licensed psychologist, I definitely, absolutely see where the logic is coming from. But that logic is also coming from a place of privilege. It may be 2019, but at least here in the United States, we seem to have found ourselves back in medieval conditions, at least when it comes to social welfare. There's this huge economic disparity between the wealthy and the poor, and if you don't see that, it's because you're not looking. Access to healthcare has become an elite privilege, especially mental health care. I think when people are dismissive about witches and practitioners of the craft doing shadow work on their own to work through their own mental instability, it can come from a place of good intention but lacking empathy. You have to think about the situation from the perspective of someone who might not be able to pay a Harvard-educated therapist $200 an hour to talk about their feelings on a weekday, no less, during working hours when they have to take time off to go to therapy, because if they do that, they're going to lose their jobs. Shadow work, even independently done shadow work, when it's at least structured in some way, can really help everyday people attain a level of emotional balance that makes it easier for them to be productive and to be more immune to toxic relationships or toxic interactions that they have to deal with. To dismiss independent shadow work or to even pass negative judgment on anybody's personal approach to shadow work is actually destructive. You could actually be hurting them even though you think your intention is to save them. Overly romanticizing shadow work isn't productive either, because when you make it sound like it's got to be all deep and hardcore and badass, you're alienating people who don't really understand it, who are like, I don't get it. I don't get how to do shadow work because I don't know how to be all hardcore and badass and deep. And then so they don't do it. They don't even try. And so they deprive themselves of the opportunity to neutralize their shadow. Shadow work doesn't have to be some deep, dark, hardcore, advanced thing. It's actually quite versatile and can be approached at any level. There isn't some one size has to fit all form of shadow work. Shadow work can be as simple as being intentional and thoughtful about taking the time to interrogate yourself when you realize you're getting emotionally imbalanced or your thoughts are running in a toxic, negative direction. When you find yourself in this space of feeling imbalanced, direct your attention and your loving kindness at the source of that imbalance and just peel away at the onion one layer after another until you get to the core of what's actually hurting you. Forms of energy cultivation like Qigong, meditation, and deep diving divination can also really be beneficial in helping you process what's really ticking you off. Spontaneous realizations or epiphanies can happen during meditation. Same with divination, like tarot readings. Qigong operates on a physiological level if you believe in the theory and helps to unclog energy blocks in your system and balance your physical qi energy or life force, which then just makes you feel Shadow work can also be religious and involved as projecting inner demons outward to be personified and perceived in some form outside of your body, where your conscious mind and your physical senses then have to confront this outward ritualized projection of your inner demon. You know, the Taoist occult practice I was talking about earlier. The kernel of truth in some of the fear-mongering, I think, is when you half-ass shadow work, or you go in halfway but don't persist and make it out to the other side. So even in the goofy eclipse example that I gave earlier, what if I put my emotional imbalance in check, identified the source as my fear of inadequacy or being perceived as inadequate, and then I don't make it through to the other side? What if I get stuck at that I am inadequate point and I don't move past it? Then I let the shadow consume me in an attempt to confront it. In my goofy example, I fall into this place of believing I am inadequate because some expert public figure, celebrity occultist, disagrees with me and I never pull myself out of that dark place. So there's something worth acknowledging, right? If you're going to undertake shadow work, you do have to commit to yourself that you will pull yourself through to the other side. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself to do that. If you're going to make yourself confront your own inner shadow, then you owe it to yourself to see it all the way through. That means whatever you find, you have to do the work. If you find inadequacy, you have to rectify that inadequacy. If you find out you're still afraid of certain types of intimacy because of past traumatic experiences, you have to take active measures to rectify that fear. And maybe at that point, yeah, it could be you realize you need to get help. You need to reach out your hands and say, I can't do this alone. I need someone to hold my hand. That's part of good shadow work. The solution to your problem is to be brave enough to reach out and say, I need help. So those are my personal thoughts on shadow work. And yeah, I'm going to mention it. I offer a tarot and shadow work online course that you can take. It comes with a bunch of videos, a book, worksheets, Qigong energy cultivation practices to help you physiologically balance yourself out, and guided tarot prompts to help you work through a Socratic method of questioning yourself. Links to more information in the description box.